Logan Sargeant is one of the hottest topics in the F1 world right now, but for all the wrong reasons. Although we've seen a massive improvement in his form in the last couple of races, that doesn't mean we're going to see him continue his voyage in the sport, as the recent sacking of De Vries has shown that no driver is safe under any circumstances. The fact that Sargeant is yet to score his first point, while Albon has 11 of them in one of the worst cars on the grid, doesn't spell good news for him. And with the technical structure of Williams, it seems like the UK-based team is hunting for another young and solid driver, this time in the likes of Mick Schumacher. Ever since Schumacher was sacked from Haas for strange and rather controversial reasons, we've been left wondering whether or not he deserved to be treated the way he was. But with how Hülkenberg brought immediate points to Haas, our answer has been given quickly, which doesn't necessarily mean that the voyage for Mick is over in the F1 world. After being signed as the reserve driver in Mercedes, he's done nothing but the best he possibly could in order to bring the W14 into the optimal operating window. That resulted in a lot of praise for Toto Wolff, who seems to be actively shopping for a starting place for Mick in 2024, and that story has just resulted in another great twist for the young German driver. After his amazing contribution to the Silver Arrows, it seems like Wolff is ready to pull a string or two to bank on the bad performing driver in Sargeant and put Mick in a place where he could thrive as an F1 driver. In a scenario in which Albon found himself in as well, after a couple of years ago being sacked from Red Bull and being seatless for one full season. When talking about Mick Schumacher and what he could bring to a team that would be willing to sign him as a starting driver, Wolff went on to say, "I think teams are missing out, to be honest. I think he was burned last year. You need to give and provide an environment and framework that's different for every driver. We're all different human beings, and whoever gets him will have a very good pilot." However, Wolff has been more than clear that he's not able to force any of the customer teams of Mercedes to put Mick in their seats, although he could recommend him thanks to the massive effort he's been doing in Mercedes as their reserve driver, and the Mercedes team principal has not been shy in words when it comes to this matter, as he continued to elaborate, "It's great to have a mature, successful and experienced Formula 1 driver supporting us. In the simulator with his feedback, that's a tremendous advantage on some of the European Grand Prix. Having him in the sim overnight and providing data for Saturday is a super advantage for us. And on the other side is that if George or Lewis were to have fish poisoning, then we know a super guy that would drive the car well. And as much as I like the situation for the benefit of the team, I would every day of the week prefer that Mick sits in a cockpit and actually races." Well, if there is one thing that Williams has proven this year, it's that they're definitely taking the right approach, and scoring 11 points is not something they could have hoped for in the past couple of seasons. With a lot of investments lacking and the technical facilities being massively outdated, the position where Williams will finish in the Constructors' Championship matters a lot, but unfortunately for them, they have only one driver that they can bank on to bring them millions of dollars more than the current spot they hold. That's something that they would like to change rapidly in 2024, and while Sargeant holds the majority of the US market with him, thanks to the fact that the sport is currently experiencing massive buzz in the North American continent, that in of itself does not guarantee him a safe seat in Williams. Considering the fact that the new team principal of Williams is the old chief of strategy in Mercedes, James Vowles, I'm 100% sure that when he and Wolff met in the past couple of weeks, one of the talking points was Mick Schumacher, and how both sides would benefit from him being the starting driver for Williams from the next season. Lawrence Barretto, an F1 reporter who is very close to the rumour mill and is constantly sharing these spicy news with us, believes that Sargeant is very close to being replaced, and with that in mind, the most obvious replacement for him would be Mick. One of the main reasons why is the similarities between Williams and Mercedes in terms of financial, technical and marketing collaboration, as well as the friendship that's present between Wolff and Vowles, with the latter one being brought to the struggling team just in order to get them back where they belong, in the top 10 points finishes. When talking about this matter, Barretto said, The British team, who sit 7th in the standings, already have highly rated Alex Albon tied up for 2024. On the other side of the garage, rookie Logan Sargeant has had a solid but unspectacular start to life in Formula 1 and knows he needs to up his game to stick around for another season. Williams have thrown their collective arm around the American's shoulders and tried to keep the pressure off him in a bid to help him find a rhythm. They're backing him to succeed and earn a second campaign in blue, but he needs to not only find consistency but also close the gap to Albon, particularly in qualifying, and get himself on the scoreboard. Well, it goes without saying that the pressure on Sargeant is very massive, mostly because he's one of the 3 drivers in the sport that's yet to score points, with one of them being out of the grid after being sacked from AlphaTauri. The second one is a driver who's had only 2 races to score points, Daniel Ricciardo, so this is not exactly the environment in which you want to find yourself as you dive straight into the second half of the season. Furthermore, Barretto believes that if Sargeant doesn't manage to find more pace in the car in the remainder of the 10 races, he'll be given a similar ultimatum as Mick Schumacher was in Haas, as he continued to elaborate. If Sargeant doesn't find more pace, his seat is under threat. Mick Schumacher would be an obvious contender, having briefly had talks with the team last year and having kept his hand in through his Mercedes reserve role, where he's earned public praise for his efforts from Hamilton and Russell. Obviously, Mick has a lot to be thankful to Mercedes, because not only did they give him a lot of opportunities to learn in one of the best yet most troublesome cars on the grid, but they're also fighting very hard to secure him a spot as a starter in 2024. While sacking Sargeant might not have as good of a financial impact on Williams as you would normally expect, we mustn't forget that they kept Latifi just because of Safina, one of the main sponsors behind his name, and we saw that they didn't hesitate that much when it came to replacing him for a better future. F1 is a sport that will always generate interest, and while Sargeant's position in the sport is not based purely on his nationality, as he was part of the Williams Academy in his F2 career, and one of the toughest spots he could have found himself into was the fact that he didn't even have enough super license points to secure an F1 seat before the last race of the season. Obviously, there were a lot of better candidates than him for this seat, but to be an American and to have a lot of funding behind your back means a lot in the sport. However, that can only get you so far if your name is not Lance Stroll. What Mick has understood more than anything in this short period of being the reserve driver in Mercedes is that times change, and it's much better to be the starting driver in an underperforming team than being the reserve driver for the best team on the grid. It was one of the main reasons why Ricciardo accepted the role in AlphaTauri, and now that Mick is more than hungry to prove his story to the F1 world, I guarantee that the Williams entourage won't affect him as negatively as Haas, which is something that the F1 fans would be more than happy to witness. Yet again, even though the popularity of the sport in the USA has increased massively in the past couple of years, that doesn't automatically mean that the fans would stand behind any USA-based driver and support him no matter the results. After all, we have Andretti entering with Cadillac, and with Ford signing the partnership with Red Bull and badging their engines, there'll be a lot of sides that the American fans could pick in the sport, and Sargeant's underperformance won't be one of them. So what do you think about Mick Schumacher in Williams from 2024 onwards? Let us know in the comments down below.